Welcome back to Accessible Gourmet. Today we're making bacon, cheddar, and scallion biscuits. I'm adapting the recipe from Chef Mei Lin. She won the 12th season of Top Chef, and her biscuits have been all over Instagram and Pinterest, and they look lovely. So I decided to give them a go. I'm not promising anything because I am definitely not a baker, but let's get started. So for these biscuits, I'm grating up 4 ounces of frozen white cheddar cheese. I froze it overnight just to make it easier to grate, and I also grated this over parchment paper just to make it easier to transfer to my bowl. We also need to grate up 1.5 sticks of unsalted butter. I'm just wearing gloves to keep my hands from slipping, because again, I tend to grate my fingers when I use my box grater most of the time, so hopefully this will help avoid that. So once we have 1.5 sticks of unsalted butter all grated, make sure to get the butter out from inside of the box grater too, because it likes to hide in there. We're going to transfer this over to the same bowl as our cheese, and we're going to throw this back in the freezer to keep it as cold as possible while we prep the rest of our ingredients. Now I just have 4 stems of green onions or scallions, and we're giving these a nice little choppity chop. We're going to transfer that over to a bowl, and I've also cooked off 4 pieces of bacon and let them cool completely. And we're going to give these a nice little rough choppity chop as well, and go back in and give it a finer mince once we have it chopped up into strips. If you're vegetarian, you can leave the bacon out completely. Chef Mei Lin's original recipe is actually just cheddar and scallion biscuits. Once this is all nicely minced up, we're going to add this to the same bowl as our scallions and set this aside while we prep our dry ingredients. So to 2 cups of all-purpose flour, I'm adding in 3 tablespoons of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of sugar, as well as 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. I'm just giving this a good mix just to make sure all those dry ingredients are well incorporated. Now that our dry ingredients are nicely mixed up, we're going to add in our bacon and our scallion and mix that up, making sure that all of our scallions and bacon are coated with our dry ingredients before we add in our frozen cheese and frozen butter. We're going to fold this into our dry ingredients as well. And last but not least, we're going to pour in 3/4 cup of cold buttermilk. We're going to mix this together until it forms a shaggy dough. And once that shaggy dough is formed, we're going to tip this out on our bench, and it is going to look like a hot mess, but this will come together. It's just going to take a little bit of work. Now your best friend in this whole process is going to be your bench scraper, because it's going to help form our little rectangle. I'm trying not to handle it so much because I don't want this butter to melt. So we're going to form this into a rough triangle, split this in half and stack it on top of each other. Again, it's going to seem like this is going to be impossible, but the more you work with this, the easier it's going to get. So I'm just using my pin here to press down on the 2 layers just to get them to get to know each other, and then using my bench scraper again just to shape this rectangle, giving it another little press, and then again splitting in half and stacking. And we're just going to repeat the shaping and pressing and rolling process, because we want to add layers. What's going to happen in the oven when this goes to cook is that butter is going to hopefully evaporate all of the liquid, and that's what's going to form these flaky, beautiful layers. And again, we're splitting in half and stacking. I actually did the split and stack 5 times. And you don't actually need to let your dough rest in between, but if you find it getting too mushy, throw it back in the freezer for a couple of minutes before you go to rework it again. I found I didn't have to do that. I just kept pressing and shaping and rolling. And one last stack here. And we want to just form this and roll this into a roughly 8 by 5 inch rectangle. And then we're going to cover this completely in parchment paper, wrap this up, throw it on a baking sheet, and we want to freeze this for 30 minutes. In the meantime, start preheating your oven to 400 degrees. Now that our dough has frozen a little bit in the freezer for half of an hour, we're going to open up our parchment. We're going to use our bench scraper to start to section this off. And you can cut these into whatever size biscuit you like. I ended up doing 4 large biscuits and 4 smaller biscuits. And you can also use a biscuit cutter round if you'd like. It's totally up to you. I'm just separating these on the sheet to give them a little space. And Chef Lin brushes these with duck fat before she puts them in the oven. I didn't have any duck fat, but I did have bacon fat. I tend to save all my bacon fat because I do cook with it. And just brush this on top. Again, if you're vegetarian, you can just use some melted butter instead. And these are going to bake in the oven at 400 for 10 minutes before we go in, flip the tray, and let it bake for 10 more minutes or until they're golden brown. Once they are golden brown and beautiful, we're going to let these rest on the baking sheet for a couple minutes to cool down, but you do want to serve these warm. And these aren't as high as her biscuits, but they were still light, fluffy, buttery, savory, and just a pleasure to eat. But there it is, bacon, scallion, and cheddar biscuits. And here's just a little peek of what I do with some of the food that I have left over the next day. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you loved it, subscribe because I put out new videos every Thursday. And if you like a little peek inside of my daily life, let me know in the comments below. Until next time, happy cooking.